Kia ora, I'm Beks, Rangatahi Engagement Coordinator for Waimakariri Libraries. Today I'm introducing you to this book, Learning to Love Blue, written and published by Saradha Koirala, finalist in the 2022 New Zealand Book Awards for Children and Young Adults. Learning to Love Blue has been shortlisted for the Young Adults Fiction Award. We'd like to express a big ngā mihi to Lienza for making this all possible. Kia ora!
When Bob Dylan arrived in New York on the 24th of January 1961, it was the coldest winter in 28 years. Leonard Cohen and Joni Mitchell moved to New York for a few years later, but I haven't read anything about their thoughts on the temperature. Well, they were both from Canada, where it snows all the time. Anyway, now I'm not in New York, and I'm not saying this is a record-breaking weather, but my own musical migration to Melbourne will be historically marked by a sheen of sweat and 30-degree heat. I put my bass down on the front step to shake off my cardigan and ring the bell, while the Uber driver unloads my luggage. It's not even 9 in the morning yet, but I'm desperate to get inside into the shade. Sean opens the door and looks exactly as I'd imagined him, based on the slow draw of his voice from our earlier phone call. His facial muscles are so relaxed, he's gone beyond cool to disinterested, nearly comatose. Black jeans, chucks, and a leather jacket over a band t-shirt that I can't quite identify. I don't think this guy checks the weather forecast before he chooses an outfit. His hair is sculptured perfectly. He must have to get it cut weekly to maintain that kind of precision. I run my fingers through my own shaggy hair and smooth down to my fringe. Sean's face twitches. Hey! Hi, I'm Paige Bell from Mudwiggle. What inspired you to write Learning to Love Blue?
So I started writing Learning to Love Blue while Lonesome When You Go was in the sort of early stages of being published. I was still editing it, and Paige's voice was still very much in my head. I knew I wanted to write another book, and I tried a few different things, but Paige was still there. I was editing Lonesome and sending the edits back to my publisher. I just felt like she had more to say. I'd also just moved to Melbourne myself, and it was a very significant move, and I thought it would be a really interesting to put Paige, who's very comfortable by the end of Lonesome When You Go. I feel like she's quite comfortable. She's got a band going, she's got her friends, she sort of knows where she fits. So putting her in a different situation and seeing how she would cope, I thought would be interesting.
How has your personal experiences shaped how Paige has been written?
Well, I have played bass in a few bands, so I think my very limited but significant experience with other musicians has certainly shaped how she is. I think she's much more feisty and strong-willed than I would ever have been in a band. But yeah, certainly the moving to Melbourne and spending a lot of time with musicians, loving music. I love talking about music, and I've kind of, geeked out on music in the way that Paige likes to at times as well. But yeah, I think probably my experiences over a long period of time. So Lonesome When You Go is set in high school, but I drew on a lot of experiences that I had after high school. So when I played in bands at university and beyond, probably more dramatic sort of band practices and things. So that was my starting point. But she's a very different character to me, I think. I wasn't playing music myself when I moved to Melbourne, but I was hanging out with other musicians and going to gigs, and I really loved that scene. So it's just really interesting. Things that fascinated me were like the different green rooms, so the backstage where the musicians would hang out, and I put a little bit of that in Learning to Love Blue. So, at this venue, the green room is like this, and they wait in an area like this, or it might be a little crammed spot that looks like a pantry at the back of the bar, so that all the different venues really fascinated me. The different styles of music that people were playing in Melbourne, I thought is really amazing. People are really bold and take a lot of risks, I think, which I hadn't seen a lot of in Wellington. Like, there's obviously lots of wonderful bands in Wellington too, but there was something different about the way people were very committed to their music, and the venues are very, very open to having lots and lots and lots of gigs, like every night of the week. So yeah, I think that whole scene was really fascinating, and I was lucky enough to kind of spend some time with musicians and sneak backstage sometimes and see that world a little bit. Yeah.
There are two older guys, much older, chatting at the counter when I walk in, and the store is beautifully ordered. New and second-hand records are all in plastic covers and sorted according to genre. They each have a typed sticker on the front that gives a description of the album and its significance. It's like a library. There's the inevitable vast collection of Australian rock, or the AC/DC and Rose tattoo you could wish for, but also an incredibly thorough collection of indie rock and garage. I'm torn between handing in my CV and just losing myself in the stacks. I'd start browsing, but I don't want to look too half-hearted about my interests in getting a job. Do you need any help? One of the men interrupts his conversation to ask me. Yeah, hi. This is a beautiful store. I'm actually looking for work, and I was wondering if there were any shifts going here. I offer my CV. I could take your CV, but to be honest, it would just end up in the pile. He gestures behind the desk as if there's a teetering pile of CVs that are about to crash down with one final edition. Right. What do I say to that? I'm still holding out my CV. People come in here all the time looking for work. I'm not trying to be harsh, it's just business really. It isn't good enough to take on more staff. More people don't buy records. Not being harsh would have been quietly taking my CV with a smile and putting it in the pile without my knowledge. Okay, well, thanks anyway. I'm torn between wanting to continue browsing and just getting the hell out of here. I've handed out exactly one CV on this mission, and the more I think about it, the less I want to work in that jumbled store with the guy reminiscing about the glory days of touring New Zealand. I'm determined to not feel defeated, but when the next place turns out to be completely closed, I can't help it. What is your favourite scene in Learning to Love Blue, and why is it your favourite?
I think my favourite scene is when Paige and Lou are in Lou's bedroom talking about music and sharing their favourite albums with each other. So that scene starts with Bridge Over Troubled Water is blaring out of Lou's room, and Paige has just had enough and she storms in there. So she goes in there with this kind of bad attitude towards music, which is kind of very Paige. She's very set in her ways about what kind of music she likes and why. So I think it's a really important scene in terms of Lou and Paige getting to know each other a bit better, but also for Paige to open her mind a little bit more towards different kinds of music and actually sit down and listen and think about different music, which is kind of a metaphor for different perspectives as well. It's also a really important scene in terms of learning to love the album Blue. So Paige plays it for Lou and says, I'm sort of struggling with this one, and Lou helps her listen to it and think about Joni Mitchell and being a female musician. There's a lot to it, and it links back to what Paige's mum has said about the album as well. So I really love that scene for that reason. I feel like it's quite key to Paige's development and growth as a character. And I also really loved writing it because I love writing about music, and I also just loved picturing them there, sitting there for sort of hours on end, listening, talking about music, really getting into it. And musicians do that. And I think that's a really key part of being a musician, is really learning to listen to music as well.
How close is your taste in music to Paige's? What are your favourite genres and artists?
Yeah, so I like a lot of the music that Paige likes. I love Bob Dylan, so there's lots and lots of Dylan's influence in Paige's life. And Leonard Cohen, the novel, so Learning to Love Blue starts with her saying, when Bob Dylan arrived in New York and when Leonard Cohen arrived, and I'd say those two musicians have been with me for a long, long time, and I love them deeply. I love Joni Mitchell. So Learning to Love Blue is Paige learning to love that album by Joni Mitchell, and I've always loved that album. I think it's a really, really wonderful, powerful, as a whole, like it's got so many brilliant songs in it, but as a whole it's just such a beautiful sort of package. Yeah, and I love Simon and Garfunkel. So Paige sort of storms into Lou's room and hates Simon and Garfunkel, but she does kind of learn to, listen, like I said before. But yeah, I love them as well. I like lots of 1960s folky music, I think.
Bridge Over Troubled Water is blaring out of Lou's room. She's been playing Simon and Garfunkel all day, and I've reached my absolute limit. I storm through her door. She's sitting cross-legged on her bed with her eyes closed and the most blissed-out expression on her face. Is she meditating? With this racket going on? She seems to notice my presence and holds up a hand to silence my not yet uttered protest. Then, as if conducting me, she moves her hand in a welcoming gesture, drawing me into the room and pointing to the seat next to her. There's half a beat pause in the song, and then the next verse starts, the crescendo rising again. There's no use trying to speak, so I sit and close my eyes with Lou, let the song fill me. God, I hate Simon and Garfunkel. Eventually the music fades and Lou reaches over and gives me a hug. Thank you, she says. What for? That was beautiful. Thank you for sharing it with me. Oh, well, I was actually coming in to ask you to turn it down, but yeah, that was alright. My parents used to listen to Simon and Garfunkel in the car when we went on family road trips. We always sang along loudest to I'm a Rock and America. I love them. My parents used to listen to them too, but I'm not a fan, I say. Lou ignores me. Oh, and once when I was really angry with my mum about something, I remember her quoting bits of Bridge Over Troubled Water to me, reminding me that she was on my side. I was kind of angry in high school. I refrained from adding my 2 cents. The songwriting is top-notch, don't you think? And their voices, totally angelic harmonies. She looks at me. What on earth don't you like about them? I just find it so ordinary. Where's the grit, the struggle? Where's the protest that typifies that era of folk music? Are you kidding me? Lou's bounced out of her meditative pose and is looming over me. She sounds mad. They were 100% in the thick of the counterculture of the protest movement, leading the social revolution alongside the Beatles and Bob Dylan. What did they have to revolt against? They grew up in New York, never had to leave town to get famous, to make their way on their own. You can hear the privilege in their choir boy voices and soppy poppy songs. Lou's mouth is wide open in disbelief. She looks like she could mortally wound me with that look. I should probably go. Anyway, I continue, Dylan hated them. No, he didn't, she shouts. They had very similar careers actually. They were even signed to the same label. I didn't actually know that. And why the hell would you hate something just because Bob Dylan hated it? That's the most cynical old curmudgeon the music scene has ever known. I'm standing in the doorway now, fuming. Lou's eyes are wide. She seems to recoil physically. Then she starts giggling. Oh my god, I'm so sorry. She's gasping and looking at me as if I've morphed into something comical. I feel like I've been slapped. She pats the space on the bed where I was sitting. I'm sorry, Paige. Sit down. Let me play something for you. Reluctantly, I sit down again. I have nothing better to do today than argue about folk music. Plus, aren't I trying to be more open? Lou flips through some CDs and puts one in her chunky old Sony stereo. I love that you have a CD collection, I tell her, my voice calming. I love CDs. They're so old school. Listen to this. She hits play and something familiar, yet strange and synthy starts playing. What is this? Is that an accordion? Drums burst out like controlled explosions. This is The Boy in the Bubble from Paul Simon's Graceland. This is his best solo album. His choir boy voice has changed into something stronger, and there's a sense of urgency and optimism in the rising major shifts. After he split with Art Garfunkel, his career was dwindling and he got very depressed. But then he had a stroke of genius in the mid-80s and wrote this album in South Africa. It's my #1 favourite album of all time, Lou says. I raise my eyebrows at her. Really? Listen. She closes her eyes and puts her hand on top of mine. I stifle a laugh, but it's not a laughing at her laugh. It's a laugh of surprised pleasure. I close my eyes too. Musically, Graceland is incredible. It soars in and out of pop and improvisation, layers of melody weaving through each song. There's African beats and rhythm. The lyrics are sometimes hilarious and conversational, and other times poetic, and an astute commentary on modern culture. Sometimes it seems to be both major and minor at the same time. We listen to the whole thing. Lou tells me all about the times she's come back to this album in her life, listening to it with her mum, playing it for boyfriends who pretended to know the lyrics. In Call Me Al, there's an epic fretless bass solo that Lou tells me was pre-recorded and added to the song backwards in post-production. That's what music's supposed to do, Lou declares. I think I know what she means. When the album finishes, I go and get my shiny red Victrola and records, while Lou runs downstairs and grabs a bottle of red wine from the kitchen. We take turns at playing each other our favourite tracks, vinyl to CD and back. explaining the significance of each. Turns out we have a lot in common. Time darkens the windows in Lou's room, but we're warm, lit, singing along. I tell her about each of the records Spike gave me, what the songs mean to me, what I learned about life while listening to them. Also, the way Spike's knowledge and enthusiasm always help me love something new. You love him, don't you, Lass? I'm quiet for a moment. He's important to me, yeah, is all I can let her have. I pull out Blue. Now this is one I'm still learning to love, I say, as I slide the vinyl out of the sleeve and place it gently on the turntable. Who are your writing heroes?
This is an interesting one. So I write poetry as well, so I have a lot of my writing heroes are probably poets. Walt Whitman is my favourite poet, and I reread Leaves of Grass often, which is a wonderful, wonderful collection. In terms of young adult, I think there's some fantastic young adult writers in New Zealand and Australia. I read a lot of Barry Johnsberg, who's an Australian YA author, when I was thinking about voice, because he creates character voice just so brilliantly. So I was sort of thinking about the way he created voice when I was creating Paige initially in Lonesome When You Go. I think Mandy Hagar is one of the greatest YA novelists in New Zealand. She can have a lot of kind of political or serious ideas behind her work while still writing incredibly beautifully. One of my favourite ever writers is David Mitchell, who in his most recent novel is actually very musically inspired. It's set in the 1960s and it has the protagonists are a band, and he kind of creates these worlds where sort of, if you read a lot of his novels, there's little links to each of them, and I just find that fascinating. He must have just this huge brain where he can keep all these different universes and worlds going, and yeah, it's quite inspiring to read.
What makes the relationship between Paige and her mother so significant? How did you craft this journey?
Yeah, good question. So Paige's mum is in the first novel, in Lonesome When You Go, as a kind of a little problem in a way. She's not really a huge part of that novel. She's sort of a bit of a confusion. And in Learning to Love Blue, I thought part of Paige's journey is to learn to have these difficult and different relationships with people. So learning to see other people's perspectives. It was a little bit tricky to write that relationship because I didn't want her to be overtly angry with her mum or never want to speak to her mum again. Yeah, I wanted her to kind of have some moments with her as well. So the symbol of the album Blue was a way to kind of have those subtle kind of connections to her mum and to show readers that she does want to get to know her mum, but she just finds it really tricky. There's never really a resolution, I don't think, in the book to that relationship, but it's a big step for Paige to kind of go to her mum and, you know, want to understand her a little bit after everything. Yeah.
I'm reading a long email from my sister while Led Zeppelin plays through my tinny speaker. I really need to get myself a record player and stop listening to Spotify. Maybe after a few more shifts at vinyl, and once I've found a permanent abode, I'll have a look for one. I should probably buy some grown-up stuff too. Pillows and towels and cleaning supplies. Is that what grown-ups do? Rose writes long letters and rarely chats online. She's a bit old-fashioned in that way. I enjoy reading about uni and study, and about some of the friends that I met when I last visited her. But there's other stuff in this email. Mum stuff. Rose is good at keeping in touch with Mum, but I still have unread emails and missed calls from her. I'm not ready to treat Mum like she's family again. I stop reading and flick over to scroll through my friends' Instagram feeds. Molly and Lily's latest escapade at some uni orientation gig in Christchurch. They're dressed up and look so much older and drunker than they were when we used to hang out. It seems a lifetime ago that we cooked dinners together and walked to school, played cards and stayed up chatting. I miss those days sometimes. Did I make the most of them? I feel less and less like a kid the longer that I'm here, worrying about housemates and rent and motivation. I scroll through pictures of Ed with his music school band at a recent gig. Although Ed's obscured in most of the shots, my amazing friend Sam, who moved north after high school, hasn't posted anything in a while. I can't remember the last time I heard from him. I hope he's found his place somewhere. Jay is ranting about some new band he loves. Maybe nothing changes after all. Scrolling a bit more, I find I am suddenly utterly homesick and lonely. I flick to my own Insta and look at a photo of Rose, Mum, and me taken on Mum's first visit after leaving so many years ago. I scan our faces for similarities. Mum's crinkly-eyed smile looks a bit sad, and I reckon Mum looks like Rose. Rose reckons she looks like me. My eyes have clouded with tears, and the three of us blur together, all with dark hair and brave smiles. Black Dog is playing on my laptop, and it's such a great song that I let the sorrow well up, even though I have no idea what to do with it. When Mum told us about her diagnosis last year, I had so many people checking on me and caring for me. Maybe I took a bit of it for granted. Rose, Dad, Linda, all my friends. The counsellor I saw twice before deciding it was too hard to talk about. Now I've pushed all of those people away, and for what? A few shifts at a cafe, some awkward new friendships, and the hope of playing on a stage someday? Perhaps Mum and I are the same after all. Since I'm already feeling bad, I decide to finish reading Rose's email. Sure enough, the Mum news sucks. My phone buzzes with a call. Lou. I'm just about to reject it when I remember my loneliness and soon-to-be homelessness. So I suck it up and answer. Lou, hi. I hear how flat my voice sounds. Paige, how are you, love? I stall at the endearment. She continues. I have a gig in a couple of weeks and thought you might like to play for us. We would need you at some rehearsals, Wednesdays and Thursday nights. Sound okay? I know I'm not in any position to turn her down, especially the chance to play on stage again. I'd love to. Where's rehearsal? Maybe I could become a session musician. Maybe that's my destiny. I'd prefer to have a rock-solid place in the rhythm section of an amazing Melbourne garage band, but a regular gig at Cherry Bar, be picked up by a talent scout, and signed to Milk Records. But for now, this will do. I'll text you the details. I have a few solo pieces and a few I'd like to do with a full band. This is going to be fun. Yeah, it will. Thanks. Also, have you thought any more about moving in here? You'd have to meet my other housemate Izzy and make sure you all could get along, but the room's available if you want to check it out. This might be a step too far. I feel anxiety creeping into my chest again. I haven't really had a chance to think about it, but maybe I could come and have a look on Wednesday, before or after rehearsal? Sure, I'll text you later. Ciao. She snaps the conversation to a close. I can't shake my initial judgment of Lou, but she is trying to include me at a time when I'm feeling left out. I should be grateful she's making an effort. What are your plans for the future? Will we see Paige again?
Ooh, I'm definitely going to write some more young adult novels, but I'm not sure about Paige. She's 18. I kind of feel like she's okay. You know, I can leave her to go off and live her life. She'll be fine. I don't know if there's another sort of young adult story with Paige. I have sort of felt like I've left her a little bit. She moves to Melbourne a couple of years after Lonesome When You Go, so it's just technically, if you want to kind of pin dates on it, it's probably just before the pandemic hits. So I sort of feel like I've left her working in a cafe and relying on the live music scene just as all that stuff kind of crumbles. So I feel a bit bad about that, but I'm sure she'll be okay. She'll figure it out. And I don't want to write a pandemic novel, so I'm just going to leave her there for a little bit. Maybe in the future I'll come back and see where she's up to. Yeah, but I think I have some other ideas, maybe even slightly more, I guess, different kind of topics that I might want to write about.